Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hi everyone, welcome to Nightlight. We're doing a special Friday night edition. It's pretty unusual for us to be doing a Nightlight Part 2 on a Friday night, or is it last Tuesday or next Tuesday? Are we taking part in the Rip Van Winkle caper? I have a couple friends joining me for some updates from the world of Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone. I've greatly enjoyed working with Mike and Nick over the last about 5 years. They've shown me more about the Twilight Zone than just the twist ending. They introduced me to a number of friends, and it's really a great group of
Hold on. Wasn't supposed to start. You there, Nick? Nick, you there?
I'm here, guys. Hey.
I am too.
Okay, was that your phone mic?
Yeah. I'm not hearing Mark.
Oh, I was hearing Mark just fine. Mark, you still there? Did we lose Mark?
Actually, no, you're not, because I think the calliope knocked him out.
Yeah, my computer popped on automatic. I didn't hit nothing.
He fell off the carousel.
Yeah, afraid so. I mean, let's see. This is only the second. I guess so. It's my show. I mean, the last time he got knocked off was when we had singing bowls, and that almost crashed the entire part. But I'm sure he will call back in shortly. He's got to know now that he's not on anymore. But I think that this is just sort of part of the weirdness of the times. Not only is humanity going crazy, but so is the internet. So we'll just, wait for him to figure out he's not here anymore and call back in. Of course, that sometimes takes a while. So you guys both are involved with the Rod Serling Park and museum and all of that sort of stuff.
Well, how would you put it, Mike? You want to start?
Yeah, why don't I? Yeah, Barbara. The organizations are both separate. The Rod Serling Foundation began obviously earlier in 1984, and I was elected president in '87, and worked with them until '94. And then I had to bow out because of health reasons mainly, ending up in a wheelchair the last 17 years, and and not doing too much. And then in 2008, the Bundy Museum opened on Main Street in Binghamton. And the Bundy Museum, I'm sure you're not familiar with, was named after the Bundy brothers who invented the time recorder clock. So in the olden days, everybody that went to work had to punch in. You've seen the images of them putting their card in, pulling the lever down, and clocking in and out. And they sold all the patents to IBM. So even before the turn of the century, it really turned over in IBM. So the museum is in the main Harold Bundy's house on Main Street, and they decided, the founder of the museum, that he wanted to open a Rod Serling archive and exhibit there. He had just moved to the area, excuse me, and wanted to, pay tribute in their own way. So the Rod Serling archive began. They called me in, and I actually ignored them for about a year. I didn't want to get back into this right away. But then, I finally did, and I'm glad I did. It's given me a new lease on life with all my health issues, something to do. So, our goals are the same. I know Nick will tell you our goals are the same, and that's to preserve the legacy of Rod Serling. And so although we do our own programs and things, they've invited me to do some programs at your last few Serling Fests, and I'm thankful for that. And on the other hand, I've had Nick 4 or 5 times at the Rod Serling Archive speaking about his book and the progression throughout the 4 or 5 years he was working on the book. So everybody here in the area is very familiar with Nick as well. So that just gives you a little background on the 2 organizations. Why don't you update or anything on your end about that, Nick?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, so I'm the current president of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation. I was just elected president. I guess it's maybe 6 months now, or not even 6 months. And the goal of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, and you can find us online at rodserling.com, is, as Mike said, it's just to preserve and protect the legacy of Rod Serling, who was more than the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is what he is known for, and it's understandable. It's his legacy. It's as far as I'm concerned, the greatest television series ever produced, and that's understandable. But Rod Serling was so much more than that. Not only in the writing field, but in the humanitarian field. He was a philosopher. He was a humanitarian, and so we try to promote not only his work, but his philosophy and his legacy of the things that he believed in. And you talked about a little bit about just how crazy the world is going right now. Well, Rod Serling was so in tune with what was going on in the world, and he would be, believe me, he would be in tune with what's going on now. And he would have some very cogent things to say about what's going on right now. And I think it's kind of almost incumbent on people like myself in the foundation to remind people what would Rod Serling say about what's going on right now, about everything. Because Rod Serling believed in speaking his mind. He thought it was his duty to speak his mind. He wasn't one of these people who thought, that it's you keep to yourself, or you don't be going to be afraid of offending people. No, he believed that if you have a platform, you better talk about what's important to you. And believe me, he'd have a lot to say right now. So right now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about that Mike and I have been working on is, it was Mike's idea about renaming Recreation Park in Binghamton after Rod Serling, and I'll let Mike go into a little more of the detail about that, because that's what Mike's going to be doing this weekend on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
I think Mark is back. Mark, did you have a nice trip?
Yeah,
you took a ride on the carousel, did
Yeah, I got.
Don't you play that thing again?
It got put up and started playing. I had it queued up for when we were ready for it.
Yeah, it started spinning around so fast it threw me into another time zone. But I'm back. It's just not. Just a little branch hit a tree or the power line in front of the house or something. Just knocked me offline for a second and wait for the computer reboot. So I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Oh, it's not your fault.
Oh.
So we're just starting to talk about the project for the petition, and so what I'd like to do, if it's all right, is give some background information of Recreation Park, because when we first started, Nick and I, talking about this, Andy Pollock, who was the president and ran the foundation for many, many years wonderfully, mentioned we might not be able to rename the park. That it could be in their charter, whoever donated it, that it could not be renamed. So I did some research online, and what we found out is, I'll give you the basic history in about a 1-minute sum up. Abel Bennett was the mayor of Binghamton at the time, and he owned most of the 18 acres, and 4 other individuals owned small parcels. So our famous industrialist from Endicott Johnson Shoes, George F. Johnson, bought up the land in 1925 from them, 18 acres, and it said there was only one stipulation, and that is the city of Binghamton must maintain it as a park in good repair at all times. There was no mention of any other stipulations that it couldn't be renamed. So we're glad that we found that information out, and that's why we're pursuing the name from Recreation Park to Rod Serling Recreation Park, because it literally enhances the name of Recreation Park, certainly doesn't take anything away from that name, and it'll do wonders for Binghamton, for Broome County. I mean, we already have Serling Fest drawing hundreds in from around the country and around the world. At the Serling Archive, we've had over 1,000. The very first year came from 43 states, including 3 groups from Hawaii, to see the exhibit. So there's a lot of interest, and I think now with Serling Fest going on, that creates more interest because everybody takes our tour map that I created about 4 years ago of 17 or 18 sites of Rod Serling, important houses and different things in his life. Excuse me. And so they all go to the park. That's about number one. The marker in front of the high school and the park and the carousel are the top priorities. And unfortunately, the carousel is not running this year, but it'll be a draw again in the future. So I asked Nick I said, because of his writing abilities, his book is amazing, and because he's such a good writer, I said, you can word this better than I can. So he drafted the online petition, and it reads really well, and urging people to sign. I think we had 424 as of an hour ago when I last looked. We literally need at least 1,000 and hopefully a few thousand based on past experiences when the foundation tried to rename the Forum Theater here, the high school, a street. We're going to need a lot of support. So that's why we're thankful to be on tonight and try and drum up some support from your listeners. It'll be really easy for them because all they have to do is go to Facebook and join, if they're not already, the Twilight Zone main site. You'll see there's about 12 Twilight Zone sites on Facebook, but the one that'll come up on top has 42,000 plus members. They just turned 42,000 a couple of days ago. And so there you'll see the artwork and stuff of Nick's petition up there, and it takes 30 seconds to type your email and sign, and I guess if you want to leave a comment, you have to get a code and then leave a comment. But, we've got almost 120 wonderful comments, people coming out of the woodwork saying that Rod used to babysit me, 3 individuals so far. 2 said, my mother used to babysit Rod. And, we'd like to interview all these people, but Nick's the only one that can use the code since he set this petition site up. And hopefully he'll be able to contact some because we're not finding these people on Facebook. Or at least none have been on Shelley's, the moderator's, 42,000 site. And then the other thing they want to do if they want to participate is just Facebook me on Messenger at Mike Pipher, and I will answer, accept your friend's request, and I'll send you the PDF file that Nick and I created with actual sheets that'll be signed with just your name and city and state. And it doesn't matter that they're states from all over the country or all over the world. We want to get as many from local to show the local media and the mayor's office. There's a lot of interest here. So those are a couple of ways. You can sign online, and you can petition, send me for the PDF file for the petitions themselves, and then I'm actually having them mailed, back to myself. And when we get at least, 500 online, which hopefully will be within a week, then I'm going to approach the newspaper here, try and get an article going, and try and get all 3 TV stations to give us some coverage and see what the response is on the local level. That'll determine if we really have a shot at this. So we're thankful for any of your listeners that will, follow up. And, you don't have to be a fan of, most of them are fans of Twilight Zone. They're not like Nick and I that are fans of Rod Serling and what he stood for and what he still stands for. So we're not getting as many numbers as I thought we would. However, and even if Walking Distance isn't your favorite episode, Do this for Rod. Do it to honor him, to keep his name alive. I don't think his name's ever going away. I think Nick will agree that 100 years from now or 1,000 years, there's still going to be Rod Serling, talking to us through his television shows, his works. It's amazing. So, you have any more info on that part of it?
Yeah, Mike. Thanks. So a couple of things. I just wanted to firstly give also the actual website. If you want to sign the petition, you can also just go directly to the website. The website is iPetitions. The letter iPetitions.com. And if you go to iPetitions.com and you just search Rod Serling, I'm sure it will come up. The actual whole website is a little bit too long for anybody to remember. But if you go to iPetitions.com and just search Rod Serling, I'm sure you'll find it. And the other thing I just want to mention, you just mentioned walking distance, and I'm sure that some listeners don't really know the connection. And so a little bit more about Recreation Park. Recreation Park is located just a few blocks away from where Rod Serling grew up on Bennett Avenue, 67 Bennett Avenue. And Recreation Park was the park that he played in. I mean, it was the park that he would walk to or bike to every day in the summer, and it was his happy place. This is where a kid enjoyed his summer. And Rod Serling, when he wrote the episode Walking Distance for the Twilight Zone, it's about a man who goes back in time to his childhood and who just wants to go back and re-experience that feeling of being able to be a kid in summer and in the park, just to go to the park and ride the carousel and eat cotton candy and listen to music from the bandstand and just kind of just de-stress and go back to that innocent time. And that was inspired by Recreation Park. And thankfully, Recreation Park does acknowledge that. There is a marker in the bandstand that says Rod Serling, creator of Twilight Zone Walking Distance, and that's going to be there forever. And the carousel itself, which is the same carousel that Rod Serling rode in 1927 or 1932, is still there, but now it has artwork inspired by the Twilight Zone going all the way around the carousel by an artist named Cortland Hull. Did the artwork. I'm looking at some of it right now. Actually, I have it as my screen, my background on my computer. But so that's the connection to Recreation Park, and it seems just so natural and so obvious to rename that park Rod Serling Recreation Park. It was, that he's the one who immortalized it in that Twilight Zone episode. He's Binghamton's most famous resident, and he really, it would be really nice to name this particular place after him.
Well, Nick, you just said that Rod was Binghamton's, biggest celebrity. He really should be seen as one of America's top authors.
I agree, of course.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate that there's his name attached to the park, which did have it inspired one of the more famous Twilight Zone episodes. It's a great time travel episode, like maybe even seemed to inspire my little trip at the start of the show. But it is appropriate to have that honor for Rod.
Yeah, it is, and it's obvious. I think it's such a no-brainer that it's hard to understand why it hasn't been done before. So we're hoping, as Mike said, to get enough signatures to at least impress the powers that be. That there is a desire for this, that people want this, and they acknowledge that this is appropriate. And as Mike said, this is the name of the park is Recreation Park, and I don't think Rod Serling himself would ever want to change that name. I think that is what it is. I think Rod Serling would never want to change history. That's what he would want. But to name it Rod Serling Recreation Park just enhances that title. It'll still be Recreation Park. It'll just be Rod Serling Recreation Park, and just to have his name on it too, just to acknowledge the love that he had for it, and the love that he had for his hometown. I mean, it's been it's a famous thing about Rod Serling, how much he loved Binghamton. He loved his childhood. He loved his childhood in Binghamton, and he was never shy about saying that. Even after he and his family moved to Hollywood, and he was, moved to California, and he was a big-time star. When he came back every summer, and the family stayed on the lake, up further north than Binghamton, he would take the drive down to Binghamton and just to drive through his old hometown and just to see the house again and just to see Recreation Park again and to see the sights, because he was a nostalgic kind of guy, as anybody who's watched his work knows. And so he would do that every year, and so he never gave up that root, the roots. He never lost the roots to Binghamton. That was always his hometown, even though he was born in Syracuse, but he moved to Binghamton when he was a baby, and so Binghamton was his hometown, and he never left in certain respects.
Yeah, to add to that, when he was, summers here at Ithaca and stuff, I can remember in Ann's book saying that, they offered to come with him, and most of the time he would always say, no, I want to go alone and visit, my youth, visit all of the homes and the 4 or 5 stores, the mom and pop stores that brought the Serling family here. Without that, there wouldn't have been any Rod Serling in Binghamton. And then even equally as important through the years, because I've been researching Rod for over 50 years, since I met him twice in 71 here in college, and we have numerous photos, and I mean 40 or 50 of him making appearances here in Binghamton through the years, and it wasn't just his summer trips. Whenever he was invited to do anything, there's a photo of him coming back for a Pearl Harbor reunion, another one for his Jewish synagogue here, the Ladies Auxiliary. He always paid his own expense. Even when he was offered money to come, he paid his own way. And the city of Binghamton, we even have a newspaper article, I don't know if Nick has seen this one yet, that when they were getting ready to tear down our famous Arlington Hotel, which is important in Rod's life and career, the city asked him for $50,000 to help create a fund and get that started. And Rod, big article, said he would love nothing more, but he didn't have that kind of money. I mean, he didn't get much money from the sale of Twilight Zones and the rights to CBS. And so, the city didn't mind to call on him for things, but it's been like pulling teeth. Do you realize, I'm sure Nick does, but it's been 72 years since Rod Serling last lived here in Binghamton. And that was in 48 when, as an apprentice at Antioch College, they sent him here for a couple of months to work at one of our radio stations. Interestingly enough, we have paperwork that has Rod talking about it himself, saying, excuse me, that he had worked at this radio station earlier in his career, and he was only there about 2 months, and they fired him. The manager fired Rod Serling, saying that he had a terrible speaking voice. Now, how ironic, because his is probably the most recognizable speaking voice in the world. Twilight Zone today, there's not 1 minute anywhere in the world that Twilight Zone is not being screened on television. It's second only to I Love Lucy, and then the Twilight Zone, and then third in syndication is The Honeymooners. So, and now with YouTube and the advent of all these pay channels and stuff, they're available, 24/7 in the DVD set. So it's been like pulling teeth, like I said. Helen Foley, in Rod's teacher, and he immortalized her in an episode, Nightmare as a Child. She had the dedication ceremonies of the New York State Historic Marker in front of Rod Serling's high school, Binghamton Central High School. And the dedication was in June of 1986. And that's how I first got involved. I saw it in the paper, and I went and met her, and I was there. And she had a very funny soundbite on one of our 3 stations. And up on my YouTube channel, I have about 21 of these rare video clips up there. And this one, she's pointing right into the camera, a real close-up. And she was very emphatic, and she said, Rod Serling's words will never be stilled, not ever, never. And she's pointing right into the camera. And a lot of people laugh at it, but I mean, that was her passion. And then she went on to say, and I think everything in Binghamton should be named after Rod Serling. So that was carried a little too far, but it's been 72 years and there's nothing. And Nick mentioned the circular bronze in the floor of the the bandstand, and I'm the one who had that made, and we laid that, and I dedicated that on Christmas Day on Rod's birthday in 1988. So we're glad it's there. It's tarnished horribly. It needs cleaning. I just called the bronze maker. They told us how to clean it, but in my wheelchair, I can't get down and do it. But hopefully Saturday or Sunday, I'll get it cleaned before our program day, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I'm glad Nick mentioned that. As a matter of fact, there's a famous movie about 3-4 years ago, Rewrite, and they didn't show our carousel, but they did show the bronze marker in the bandstand for just a couple of seconds, and the whole thing was a flavor of Binghamton, our Speedies, and Link Aviation, and everything here, and so it's cute. In the segment that the two stars did with the carousel, was hysterical because he was afraid of the carousel. So if you haven't seen the movie, check it out. It's a lot of fun, and quite a bit of it was filmed right here in Binghamton.
I did want to just add one thing. There is at the Binghamton High School. There's the Rod Serling School of Fine Arts. That is named after Rod Serling there, and actually the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation gives a scholarship to a graduate of the Rod Serling School of Fine Arts each year, and we actually just chose this year's recipient of that award. And I'll mention his name. His name is Trevor Terry. I haven't even mentioned it to him yet. So if he happens to be listening, this will be his news that he won the this year's Rod Serling Memorial Foundation scholarship. So yeah, we do that, and that's one of the things we do in Rod Serling's name is give out that scholarship each year. And so that is, and they have a plaque for in honor of Rod Serling at the school, and also of Helen Foley right outside the theater at the school. It's actually the Helen Foley Theater. So she's acknowledged there as well. And as Mike said, there's the historical marker outside the high school. But something like this, naming the park is a little bit different. It's like Mike mentioned, and renaming the Forum Theater was something that in Binghamton was something that was thought of or approached, and that would have been nice. But this is even more appropriate, the park, for all the reasons that that we've already talked about.
Yeah, and
strange. Go ahead, Nick. Mark.
Oh, I just want to say in Nick's book, Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, on page 205, he specifically states walking distance. In a 1963 interview, Serling spoke of the inspiration for walking distance, and Nick provides this quote: "I'm the kind of guy who is now in that aging late 30, early 40 bracket in which suddenly there's a tremendous, bittersweet, poignant feeling about wanting to go back to another time. In my case, it would be pre-war, early teens time, which was particularly happy for me." And it goes on. But that all ties in with what you two have been saying about the recreation park and what it meant to Rod personally.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Where was that quote from?
That is from an interview that Rod did in Australia, actually, in Australian radio, and you can find it online. If you just Google Rod Serling Australian radio, you'll probably find it pretty quickly. And it's one of those interviews that just kind of popped up not too long before I wrote the book. So new interviews and videos and audio of Rod Serling are kind of popping up all the time, and that was one that just came to light maybe 5 years or so ago. Not even probably, but so he was talking about it when the Twilight Zone was being syndicated in Australia, and he was talking about walking distance.
Okay, and Mike, you let me introduce that little passage. You were starting to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, You guys are the hosts. And I forgot what I was going to say anyway, so, we pick up from here.
Okay, well...
On a lot of meds, Nick.
Okay, well, one of the... Mike, one of the really nice things that you do have to for visitors of the Bundy Museum to pick up when they visit is the map of downtown Binghamton and how to get to the family's business, the home, boyhood home. There's some of these places are now vacant lots, but we know where, like the bus station that was used in after hours was located. Map of about 18, 17?
I think there's 17 on there now. There's actually 25 that I've been working on, expanding it into a booklet style with a little story of each. I like to use the Paul Harvey and his famous radio show, and now the rest of the story. I always do that in my programs, and I love to give some background information that nobody else seems to have. I have this chronic cough, so excuse me. Interesting about the tour map came about quite by accident. I went to the Binghamton Library to look through the Historic Society city directories, and I actually, started in 24, but I didn't think about it right away that, from the census those years and when they did the city directories door to door, they did not list anybody under the age of 18 that was in the household. So Rod's name never appeared in any of the directories. And even more, I forgot that you have to go to the year after to get the year behind. So if you wanted 1924, you had to look at the 1925 directory that would cover 1924. So what I found out was really interesting because most of the articles that I had read through the years said that Rod was a little over 2 when he moved here. But no, he was just barely over 1. And as I mentioned earlier, the grocery store chain, and Nick, can verify because he's done so much research too. This information that the Cooper family grocery stores, meat market, was his grandparents, and they wanted to open a store here in Binghamton. They actually started in Auburn, New York, not far from Syracuse, and had some stores in Syracuse. And they wanted to expand to Cortland and to Binghamton. So they sent the parents, and of course Rod's older brother, Robert, because of the age difference, he was here. And they sent him here years earlier to case out the joints and try and find a sufficient location that would really find a good Jewish population area, because they were a kosher meat market to start. And so I started going back years and years. And I actually went back to 1918, and I printed out all the city directory pages with this information. And Mom and Dad, they first came to Binghamton and stayed in 1918 at the Arlington Hotel. And they lived there for 6 months and 6 months in Cortland, casing out the area. And then again in 1919 they came and lived at another hotel. I think it might have been the Bennett. And then they came in like 1920, and they lived in an apartment not far from the Bundy on the west side. And then they came the next year again and had another apartment they lived in. So it took 4, 5, 6 years of them coming here 3 to 6 months a year to really settle in on a location. So right after Rod was born, his father Sam left the family in Syracuse and came here and got an apartment just a block away from the high school. And then, of course, he just had made one left turn and right over the bridge, and they opened up the first meat market here on Court Street, which is our main street downtown Binghamton. And now there's a restaurant opened up there 3 years ago called the Colonial that's very popular on that location. And his father, Sam, must have been brilliant because within a few months, the name was changed to Serling Sanitary Meat Market. And I'm not sure why the sanitary came in there or just how that came about. But very quickly became the Serling market, not the Cooper family market. And then going through the rest of the years, right up through 1945, there were 5 locations of their store. Most people list 2, but there's actually 5. And again, I have them all from the directories. And it changed names at one point to Darling's Meat Market after his father's health started getting really bad. They even brought in a cousin from Syracuse to help right after Rod had joined the service. They couldn't make it on their own. They brought a cousin down, and he lived there, and he was in the directory. Excuse me. So, if it wasn't for the Cooper family and the meat market chain, Rod would have, lived in Syracuse and, may never have ended up writing at all. So we're so thankful. So it's just a little history of how they came here. So our tour map, because of that information I dug up, I decided to start listing all of these places. And we found the house that we didn't know Rod lived in. There was a house before Bennett Avenue, and I think it's 16 Laurel Avenue. I know it's Laurel Avenue, right on the river. And nothing fancy of a house, not near as nice as the one they bought a year later that we all know on Bennett Avenue. But it's funny, right after I found that and took pictures and posted that, Ann Serling did a live show and talk and some video footage and stuff with our PBS station, WSKG, and I went, and that's where I got to first meet Ann. And as I went in, I was handed, somebody was standing there passing out flyers, and it was a full-page color sheet of Rod Serling's house, the first house for sale, $125,000. Well, I was livid. I said, somebody picked up on my information, came to the Bundy, took a map, printed it, and was passing out my tour map, the house, and trying to capitalize on it. So by the time I informed some of the people at SKG, the guy was gone. He must have given out all the flyers. But the house ended up selling for around $40,000. They had no takers at that extreme because it was only booked at about $35,000. And I'm told that 3 college students from SUNY actually got together and bought the house themselves and are living there now. So you'll find a lot of information like that. Then because of the first program I did right after we made the map, so I think it would be 15, called Rod Serling Binghamton. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I think that Nick was there because I had him speak, and I actually got his picture in the paper. They stayed the whole 2.5 hours interviewing everybody who was there, all these older ladies in their late 80s and 90s that dated Rod and went to proms, and they came to get my picture, and I said, I've had my picture in enough times. I says, right here's our guest, get his picture, put it in, promote the book, and they did, and it was great. I'm glad we had a part in being able to kick off Nick's career. But the next day, I got a call from the museum staff saying that somebody in the area had some important information for us, and he wanted me to come and interview him. And I believe he was 86 or 7 at the time. And I made a 45-minute recording. I think it's John, but the last name is Levine. Mr. Levine's older brother was Rod's ultimate best friend all through school and all through life. A matter of fact, he named the doctor, Dr. Levine, in the Night Gallery Messiah on Mott Street, the Christmas episode. And so at any rate, we found out some information that Nick didn't know and I didn't, and I gave him a copy of that audio. And it told on there how Rod ended up back in Binghamton, because when he was discharged, he didn't let anybody know, according to the interview, that he was coming back, being released. And Jack Levine and his mom were in New York City on a bus, spotted Rod on the corner of whatever street they were on, in uniform with his duffel bag. They stopped, they got off the bus, and they ran up to him and said, Rod, what are you doing here? Why didn't you let somebody know? He says, I didn't know where I was going or what I'm going to do. And she said, the mother said, you're coming home with us. And so after Dr. Jack had his surgical procedure on his leg, they came home. They brought Rod Serling here. So there's another house nobody knew about, and it's on Leroy Street. And it's a really unique, funny-looking house, sort of like right out of the Twilight Zone. You'll see some pictures, I'm sure, on the website by now. And he stayed there for 2 months before he went back up to live with his mom and aunt up in Schenectady. And Nick is the one that told me that that's where they went. He went from here, was up there, and then he went to on the GI Bill to Antioch. So do you have any more enlightenment about that, Nick, about after the war? I think I have it right that he went to Schenectady, wasn't it?
Well, his mom had moved to Schenectady with her sister, or with Rod's aunt, and I believe it was her sister, or it might have, I believe it's a sister. So the one thing I guess that people would need to know is that Rod's father died while he was in the military, and Rod was not able to come back for the funeral, and this was another thing that just really aided him for the rest of his life, that he was not able to be there for his father's funeral. And when he came back from the war, his mother had moved from Binghamton to Schenectady with his aunt, and he was really aimless. He came back, and his roots were gone from Binghamton. His mother wasn't there. His father was gone. So he really didn't know what he was going to do or where he was going to go. So I certainly could picture that scene of a friend saying, "Hey, come stay with us," and he said, "Yeah, why the heck not? I'll stay with you for a few months," because he really was the way he put it was he was at loose ends. He was bitter about the war. He was at loose ends, and he didn't know what he was going to do. So he first certainly may have stayed with them for a few months. And I honestly don't know if he did go to Schenectady to stay with his mom, or if he did just go directly to Antioch. He probably did go stay with his mom in Schenectady for a little while. Actually, I'm almost positive. Yeah, he almost certainly did before he went to Antioch, and then that's in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and that's where he met his wife Carol, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I remember that when you were doing your book, you sent me some sort of a document that he had gone there, and it said that he went on the GI Bill from Schenectady to Antioch. So, I'm
right,
sure.
Yes, and actually, I do remember now that when he applied to Antioch, he actually gave the Schenectady address. So yes, that was he certainly was living there at the time.
Yeah. Mike, I just wanted to say, that map that we're talking about that people can get at the Bundy Museum really does help people to visualize, Rod's childhood. And like I said, there's the Boscoff, or what's now the Boscoff department store at the end of the bridge, Main Street Bridge. It's just it is very helpful in a student, fan, aspiring author to walk in his footsteps, and they have those kind of pamphlets of Dickens's London. They take people on tours, but it just really helps you to connect with the author, see the things that he saw, what he was later.
Easier. Yeah. It makes it easier to see everything because our director, our director of operation, Jan Rudlow, I gave her the information, and then she laid out the map in a circular fashion. So, as you come out of the archive parking lot, you turn left on Main Street, you turn left at 3 blocks, and you're at Recreation Park. Then from there, you go to the house on Bennett Avenue. Then from there, we send you over to the house on the first house because it's closer. And then we ended up, you go by the father, Sam Serling's first apartment. You end up at Rob's last apartment before the war when they sold the house in 1940 and moved into an apartment on the second floor on Chapin Street. So it does a circular type of a map crossing the bridge. So you have Boscov's, as you mentioned, which was the former Fowler, Dick, and Walker when Rod grew up there. And one of the meat markets was right next door where our parking lot is. And, so when he was delivering meats, and it rained, he'd be scooting in. I've actually read where he worked in the toy department there when he was 12 years old for a while, just to make some extra money. And then you go on up to Resnick's on the corner, which was in the pilot, the first episode, Where's Everybody? You see the Resnick's trucks, the mannequins. Then you turn left and you're at the bus station, and then another block, you're at the Arlington. So it's a nice loop around all of the areas. It covers his synagogue. It covers the Unitarian Church right near the synagogue where he attended every time he came back, summers and stuff, and was still here. He attended the Unitarian Church there. covers the old Jewish Community Center on Front Street right on the river where he took his Sunday school classes. And interesting, one of the foundation's original board members, Sybil Goldman-Berg, who just passed away within the last year, she was in Sunday school classes with Rod when he was 5 years old, and they were lifelong friends. And she had a photo, and I don't know where it ended up after she passed, of his Sunday school class of about 7 or 8 of the students when he was 5 years old. And you can still see it if you go to my YouTube channel and look at the Rod Serling videos I put up there, because she held it up and they did a close-up of it. I think that was on the David Rossi interview show. And so at least we have an image of it that way. But I think we got it, between Nick and I, we've got to start checking into where that photo ended up, see if we can't get a hold of it and get a copy, because it was a wonderful piece. So that's how the tour map became available. And so like I said, there's 17 on there, but there's about 25 sites right now. And, who knows what else will end up on there.
It's well done.
Yeah, it's a nice aid for people. We had it on our website for several years, and then our website crashed, and somebody bootlegged it from Gucci. It was a rip-off Gucci company selling fake pocketbooks and stuff. Ended up with our Rod Serling archive site, and we were never able to get it back. So it's been 2 years in the process of using the Wayback Machine and trying to get some of that material and get it back up there. But as we get the archive website back up, we will put the map back up there. Then they can download it too.
Mike, you just mentioned your YouTube site, and you've been doing a number of live streamed Facebook talks, and
Nick got me started on that. He did a great 2-hour one a few months ago that 800 and some people were online watching it, and I was one of them. And so Shelley challenged me, since I can't do my programs at the museum, to do something. So the first one was 38 minutes, and it was sort of fun, but it was a lot of work for me to get my thoughts and get things in order. And then the second one I did on the Man in the Funny Suit, one of my favorite Serling pieces of all time, that he didn't write, but he was in it as himself on the background story of the Requiem for a Heavyweight live broadcast for Playhouse 90. And then that got lost from my site and everywhere. And then the third one I did on Earl Holliman for about 40 minutes got lost. It hit 557 views and disappeared. And so I ended up redoing it about a week later. Everybody kept saying, "Where is it? I want to watch it again," or "I heard about it." So I redid it, and this time it was a little over an hour because we talked about the carousel too. And in it I played the 8-minute Earl Holliman tape that he made for me in June of 1987. So, long time ago. And that was what I played at the second annual Rod Serling Film Festival that we ran that year. And it's been very well received, and I'm flabbergasted because it's been like 10 days ago, and I looked an hour ago, and it's up to 1,152 views. I have never, double and triple of all the other programs. So Mr. Holliman is still very, very popular, and that episode is so popular, being the first, official Twilight Zone episode. Do you want to talk some about Where's Everybody next?
Well, actually, yeah. You know what? Just before we run out of time, I did want to mention, I haven't actually mentioned it yet, but this Sunday, June 28th, is the 45th anniversary of Rod Serling's death in June 28th, 1975. He was 50 years old, died way too young. And so this Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, I'm actually going to be doing a live, just a short presentation just to acknowledge the date and say a few words in tribute to Rod Serling. That's going to be on the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation Facebook page. So go to Facebook, look up Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, you'll find us. And I'll be doing that at 10 a.m. on Sunday. And then Mike has an event going on in the afternoon at Recreation Park, also to commemorate the day and to talk about and to disseminate this petition for renaming the park. So you can mention that, Mike.
Yeah, I had invited Nick to join me on that, and because of the pandemic and everything, it's tough traveling and things right now. So I certainly understand his not being able to join me. I know his heart was in it because he said, "I really want to be there." And what we're going to do at 2:30, weather permitting, I may have to change the time tomorrow because they're saying chance of some light storms throughout the day, but it looks like major blocks are going to be free. So I'm aiming for 2:30. I want to speak right from the bandstand where the marker is, in honor of Rod Serling. It's been 45 years, as Nick mentioned, and I can't remember one of the 45 years where our newspaper or our radio stations or TV stations mentioned, by the way, this is the such and such anniversary of the death of Rod Serling, Binghamton's first famous son. And it's just about time that something is done along those lines, too. So we don't want a large crowd. I did not do a press release, just word of mouth to some of our regulars that come to my programs. And we've got 15 or 20 that are going to be there. And that's why I came up with this Calliope tape, which just came in today. I paid $15 overnight to get the tape in, and I'll explain that in a minute. But this is the actual carousel music that Rod listened to from our Recreation Park carousel. So I figured the park might have 50 or 100 people wandering around because I've been driving there a few times in the last week and finding 40, 50 people, and hopefully Sunday afternoon we'll have more. And if I play that music with the microphone and stuff, and they know the carousel's closed, they're all going to come to the bandstand to see what's going on. So it's my way of trying to lure them in and then talk about the petition as well and things. So we are looking forward to maybe 20, 30 people, and I'm hoping to have our 3 TV stations there to film the actual short talk. I'm going to do it live on Facebook, and we're going to also videotape it with a widescreen Dolby high-def stereo camcorder and get that up on my YouTube site, and then we can steer people how to find that. And by the way, if you want to look at any of these videos, just go to YouTube and type in my name, Mike, M-I-K-E, Pipher, P-I-P-H-E-R, and it will bring in 20-some Rod Serling videos, of a lot of it local stuff from the years, interviews and things that nobody has seen, other than a few snippets here and there at my programs at the museum. So, check some of that out as well. Nick, I think they said we could do the full 2 hours, so that's up to you if you want to stay on. Am I right, Mark?
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I have a lot of questions we could get into as well.
I'm not going anywhere, so yeah, absolutely, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, so let me talk briefly about the carousel. Harvey Rail had a publishing company here in Vestal, and he was the world's largest collection of calliopes, all original calliopes, player pianos, music boxes, anything music related. And he had a big museum built on his house here in Vestal, about 3 miles from the museum, and it was amazing. Well, before he passed away, he recorded this to cassette, and then his wife, after he died, did it to CD. The music is all public domain stuff from the teens and 20s of everything, from what I was going to play for you that started on its own. There's Bill Bailey, Won't You Please Come Home, and there's Ma, He's Making Eyes at Me, and just that type of music from that era. And although they didn't take the equipment there to do it, because nowadays I'm pretty sure they're using a computer chip or CDs and things for the music. They're not playing the originals that was there on the Wurlitzer then. But this was from the same model, the same everything from 1925 in the Rail Museum. It's the same music they said that played when Rod grew up there. So it's fascinating, and it's very rare. There was only one on eBay used, and I found one new one, and then I paid $14.95 for 2-day delivery to get it here in time to be able to use it Sunday and hopefully draw some people to the bandstand. So if you like calliope music in general, it's a lot of fun. I was reminded when I listened to it today, I had forgotten because I rode the carousel. I think I rode it with Nick when he was here. Didn't you hoist me up there, Nick? I think it was you.
Well, I was with you, but I didn't do any hoisting. Somebody else may have hoisted you up there.
I did have to be hoisted up there at the pole in my left hand and somebody on my right hand, and I had to sit. I certainly can't sit on a horse with my weight and my health problem. But I wrote it, and I forgot that when the new song would start, they always started with like 15-second intro and then stop with the boom and then started the song all the way through. So I found that interesting because I forgot that from my youth of riding the carousel all the time. That seems to be the custom. So that's a little history of the carousel music, and it's fun to just sit here and listen. I just reminisced for 20 songs this afternoon and said, this is the music that Rod Serling heard as a child when he played and rode the carousel. And not just riding it, but even as he was older, playing tennis there and just doing anything.
Or baseball.
The music just flowed. So I'm sure he heard it a lot.
Okay. Mike, did you want to play it?
No, because I'm sort of afraid to. I think maybe that knocked you off the air. I don't know what happened.
No,
I was sitting here doing nothing, and my cat's laying on the back of the computer. All of a sudden, it just started blasting, and I had to shut it down as quickly as I could. So they already heard a sample of about 15, 20 seconds. So I don't think we need to do that again because it's pretty loud.
Okay.
But thanks for the opportunity.
I was off the air too, so I didn't realize that mysteriously happened to you at the same time. But Nick, since Mike was talking about the interview he did with Earl Holliman, you have in your biography that Earl and Rod worked together on Playhouse 90, and just that the tape Mike played shows the friendship lasted over the years. And I thought very highly of Rod, but when people read it's really interesting where draw our attention to like some of these pre-Twilight Zone shows like Playhouse 90, and that's where Rod and Earl met, and John Frankenheimer is directing the Dark Side of Earth episode. They go on. Rod goes on to write the 7 Days in May, and John Frankenheimer's directing that, and he's involved in directing Manchurian Candidate. It's just really interesting how all these people came out of like the same show, and their paths would cross many more times down the road.
Yeah, you find that with actors, with directors. Absolutely. And Rod and John Frankenheimer, I say this in the book, that I think probably second to Rod Serling and Buck Houghton, who was the producer of The Twilight Zone for the first 3 seasons. Besides Buck Houghton, John Frankenheimer is the person who Rod Serling had, I think, the best creative relationship with. Frankenheimer directed some of Serling's best Playhouse 90 episodes, and as you mentioned, 7 Days in May, which I think is clearly Rod Serling's best screenplay and best movie. They were close friends, John Frankenheimer and Rod Serling, and yes, Rod initially met Earl Holliman on a show called The Dark Side of the Earth on Playhouse 90, which was very good, and Earl Holliman is terrific in it, and Rod remembered him from that, and he ran into him before Twilight Zone was on the air, and he had written the pilot episode, and he saw Earl Holliman, and he said, "Hey, I just wrote this, this pilot script, and you would be perfect for it, and here it is," and that was it, And Earl Holliman, I got the chance to talk to Earl Holliman several times after I wrote the book. Actually, strangely enough, not before I wrote the book, but after I wrote the book, and he is a gentleman's gentleman. I mean, he is such a sweetheart of a guy, and he loved Rod Serling. He really did. I don't know that they had a real close friendship, but the admiration was clearly there. I mean, Earl Holliman really, really admired Rod Serling. I'll give you a quick story. I sent him a bunch of photos to sign for the foundation that we were going to use for a raffle for one of the Serling fests, and so I sent him a bunch of photos, and he actually called me and he said, "Nick, I'll sign all these photos. I have no problem whatsoever." He said, "Except for this one photo, I can't sign this one picture. And, why can't you sign it?" He said, "Because I look angry in it, and I don't want to give people the wrong impression because I was never angry on that show. It was a beautiful experience the whole time. In this picture, I look like I'm telling Rod, you got to change this line or something, and I don't want to give people the wrong impression." I said, "Earl, I really appreciate, your sentiment, and absolutely you can throw that one out if you want. Don't worry about signing it." And so that's the kind of guy he was. He wanted it to be absolutely 100% positive. The impression he gave of his relationship to the show, his relationship to Serling, and his memories of the show. He loved that particular episode, and what actor wouldn't? Because it's virtually a one-man show. And Earl Holliman says that when he got the script, he had been in Forbidden Planet, Earl Holliman, and so when he heard this was going to be a science fiction thing, he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm probably going to get the script, and I'm going to be one of 20 guys on a spaceship, and maybe I'll have a few lines or something." And he said he couldn't believe it when he's reading it. It's all him, page after page, and he loved it. And by the time he got done with it, he said, "Oh my God, he would have done anything to do that show." So. So it was a great opportunity for him, and Earl Holliman had a terrific career. He went on to do Policewoman and plenty of guest starring roles, plenty of big movies as well. So and he's just a really great guy. And you find that, and I hope this comes through in the book, that you find that people who worked with Rod Serling love the guy. I mean, it's really, really hard to find somebody who would say a bad thing about Rod Serling who had worked with him. Actors loved him. Again, Earl Holliman, one of the things he said that impressed him immensely was during that Playhouse 90 episode when they were rehearsing it, he went to Rod Serling and said, "Hey, Rod, I have this idea. I think this character should say something along the lines of this." And he says, to my amazement, Rod Serling took out a pencil and started writing down what I was saying, and he actually used what I suggested. He said that was unheard of for a writer to do that. Most writers would say, you're an actor, you go do your job, I'm the writer, I'll do my job, and that's it. And he said, Rod Serling had no ego like that. He said, yeah, that's a great idea, and he took it down. And he said, I never forgot that. And that's the kind of guy Rod Serling was. He liked to work with people. He loved that creative atmosphere of bouncing ideas off somebody as long as they were receptive. So he had a great working relationship with the actors, with John Frankenheimer, with all sorts of people, and he worked with certain people, over and over again.
Yeah, and maybe about a year or so after 7 Days in May came out, John Frankenheimer directed Birdman of Alcatraz, and that had Telly Savalas in it. So there's kind of like another Twilight Zone connection, and then we take that back to Mike's museum, and they have a replica of Talkie Tina. What? Tell us about that display and the reproductions of the masks.
Yeah, Mark, let me pick up on something Nick just said about Earl Holliman. It's interesting because I actually did some video transfer work. He had some 16-millimeter prints back in the early 80s from a one-season show called Hotel de Paris, and a friend of mine did all of his film transfers to video, so that's how I got to know him years before. So in 87, when I was putting together the Rod Serling Celebrity Fundraiser Auction, I contacted him, and he sent a script signed by both him and what's her name from the first show you mentioned. My mind's going, the cop show.
I'm sorry. Angie Dickinson.
Yeah.
Angie Dickinson.
So that was signed by both of them, very nice, and he sent some signed photos. And then the year later, I called him about the star ceremonies, and so I actually have a 30 or 40 minute another tape of the conversation of Earl and I before the one that he did where he made the recording for me for the film festival. And on the film festival one that I just played, the 8-minute one, he mentioned, that he ran into Rod in the back lot of MGM. He was doing another Playhouse 90 that wasn't Rod's, but he wasn't happy with it, and that Rod spotted him and they talked. But on my personal tape, to me, it was a little funnier. And he said that here I was not happy with the show I was doing. I come out of there, I wasn't in a good mood, and I kept hearing something that I thought was my name in the distance, like Earl. And I didn't pay any attention. I didn't turn around. And he said, I literally, as I got about 5 feet from my car, got tackled from behind and thrown onto the dash. He hit me so hard, it threw me onto the dash of my car. And I turned around ready to punch the guy out, and it was Rod. And he said, well, I tried to get your attention, and you wouldn't listen to me. You didn't answer me. So I thought that was pretty comical. And and then, he went into the whole
I
bit,
can picture that.
Nick's book as well about he went in, and Nick's book tells about the same thing about the filming, and he had a bad cold, and he touches on that. And the first day of shooting, there was either no film in the camera or the aperture didn't work, so they got no footage. So then when they had to redo the whole day's work, he says you can hear the raspiness in his voice, the difference in the day's shootings, and you can when you watch the episode if you really listen for it. So, even though it's only an 8-minute tape, it had a lot of punch to it. And you got to remember, for 1987, the only Rod Serling thing out there was Mr. Siegfried's Twilight Zone Companion. So there wasn't, there was no Google search, there was no internet search to find out all this information. So at that time, that was very important, the contents of Earl Holliman's tape. It wasn't an interview. He just recorded it. I asked him to record it in a cassette, which he did from Calgary, Canada, while he was filming the Gunsmoke reunion movie. And so it made it really ahead of its time. Now everybody's heard Earl Holliman tell that story 50 times, and it remains 99% the same, but never had the information about being tackled and literally thrown onto my car. And then Nick
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Say what you were going to.
I was going to say, just to add to that, and just to give another little piece of trivia, that you mentioned Hotel de Paris, it was called. That show was actually on the same night as Where Is Everybody, the debut of the Twilight Zone, the same night. It might have been directly before. Yeah, it was directly before it, I think, not the same. But so Earl Holliman was on it twice that night. He was on his own series, and then he was on the Twilight Zone the same night.
Wow, I forgot about that. You had mentioned a few minutes ago Buck Houghton, producer, and I got to tell you a funny incident when we did the star ceremony for Rod in Hollywood. I won't go into the details of how my suggestion and then the foundation's hard work got the star out there, but here I am out there. MGM hired me, didn't pay much, but they hired me to pull the stars in to speak and to work with the after party, and they hired me to produce and direct. And so I worked with Carol for 4 12 and 14-hour days at a studio right near the Hotel Roosevelt, and I brought the films from Rod's personal collection from Ithaca on the plane, and then we sat there and watched everything, and Carol and I edited all the footage and said what we wanted used, and that was only shown once at the after party. But right before we were getting ready, about an hour before they were going to unveil the star, I was talking to some people, and I didn't know who I was talking to, and he asked who I was, and I told him, and he didn't give me a name, an older gentleman, and I says, boy, I've been waiting for this for a long time. And he looked at me and smiled, and he says, so have I. Son of a bee if it wasn't Buck Houghton. And here I am, I'm filling the star. I'm kneeling next to Johnny Grant and Carol, and there's Buck on the other side. And I cringed. I mean, I felt like an inch tall. She's been waiting a lot longer than I was. I never shared that with anybody, so you got a first out of us.
and another guy who again, they worked closely together, and he loved Rod. They were great. They were great friends. They got along great, and nobody worked closer with Rod Serling and Buck Houghton during those years. So it really is amazing the working relationship that he had with all of these people.
Yeah, it is. Like I would agree that 99.9 really loved him and stuff. And Earl said you hit it on the head. They weren't real close friends, but he mentioned on the tape that I would run into Rod at parties a lot and at restaurants, and they always spoke. So, he did see him throughout his life, but as far as close friendship, no, there just wasn't time. And Rod had his busy career going, and Earl had his busy career going. And I mentioned to Mark this afternoon, I actually sent a large package to Earl Holliman 2 days ago, which you'll get tomorrow, priority mail. And I wanted that photo of him and I from 32 years ago to get signed. And so I sent him a lot of stuff for him to keep. He was best friends with Anthony George, another actor from Endicott, which was here in Binghamton. Star of The Untouchables, Checkmate, Dark Shadows, soap operas. And he had mentioned on the tape that he was here before, staying with the George family. And so I sent him a lot of photos about Anthony's star ceremony, which was the third star. Rod was first, and then Richard Deacon was second, and Anthony George third. And I told him a lot of stories about what we did together when he was here. And then I sent him about 20 photos of Rod Serling's star ceremonies here at Binghamton, which took about 5 years to get laid from the time I proposed it to the COG committee, the Committee on Architect and Urban Development, and it was voted on. And it took about 5 years to actually, we got the bronze done in about a year. But it sat in one of the board of directors' car, Trump, for about 3-4 years. And because there was no money for the city to do the first slab of concrete work at $3,500. So finally, a friend of the Serling family came forth and donated the money anonymously. And then at the actual star ceremonies, he came, and when asked why he did it, he just said, I have my reasons, and I'm glad to be able to do it. And, didn't go into detail much. He later on, when we talked, said that he used to go to the Serling house all the time, and they'd just sit on the porch and talk, the whole family. And his mom would bring out fudge and iced tea and stuff. So they had a friend relationship with the whole family, not just with Rod. So it's fun when people like that come out of the woodwork. If we left it to the city, it never would have gotten in concrete. And so we're so glad it did. But, that was like 3-4 years after the Hollywood Star. And yet I started this earlier than the Hollywood Star process. So it's funny how time, and I remember the Hollywood Star for Rod cost $3,500, and the Serling estate paid for it. Right now, I just read an article 2 weeks ago, a Hollywood Star right now costs $35,000.
Oh, jeez.
So
wow.
that's
well,
quite
10 times.
Quite a jump from $3,500 to $35,000, and going up. I don't know why such a drastic change, but so that's just a couple of side notes on names that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And Mike, speaking of side notes, Carlisle Rachel is enjoying the show, and Johnny and Helen took a break from eating tacos to say they're enjoying the show as well. But
Great.
Mike, I wanted to get into what you have on display at the Bundy Museum. And can you tell us a little bit about what they see?
Yeah.
When people can, it's safe to travel. Hopefully, they put you on a destination stop if we can salvage the summer.
Yeah, well, here's where we're at as of yesterday with the museum. Because of the pandemic, we're taking the high road. We have a lot of people that are, seniors with underlying health issues like I do, and some of the grandparents in their 90s, so they're very leery. So the museum has taken the high road and said we are not going to open this year at all, not until at least January. However, As of today, stage 4 in New York State, we are allowed to have 50% capacity in there, and our little theater only holds 63. So we could do a program. So what the museum's decided, anybody that wants to travel to Binghamton or is traveling through, if you want to see the exhibit, you have to email them a couple of days ahead, and they will answer you and accommodate you with the time, and they will do small groups of 10 or under, up to 10. You have to have your mask on. You'll have to social distance. And, they're willing to stand there and do, 4 or 5 groups, one right after the other. But it'll be on a setup basis by itself for the rest of this year. Now, the exhibit for Rod Serling is always free. We've never charged. Our in-the-zone programs are always free. However, I'm going to urge the people, because the museum is hurting like everybody else with no money coming in and a budget of over $10,000 a month to operate, to take the tour for $7 of the whole property. It's well worth it. I can't take it because I can't do stairs and all these spiral staircases and 2 or 3 floors. But I talk to people, and they love it. And Nick knows that we now have a couple more new buildings that are just opening up. And so, you don't have to. You can see the exhibit free, but we urge you to take the tour. And I think you even have group rates of, 5 or more, and it's well worth seeing. So we're talking about buildings. They just bought the corner building, which is a brick building that was actually my baby doctor. I had my tonsils out there when I was 7. And that's our new museum visitor center. So instead of being right behind the Annex Theater where we have the exhibit, that will be our new visitor center. So there will be Rod Serling pictures and articles and things and maps there. And then one of 3 houses they bought 2 years ago or 3 years ago, right around the corner. So we now have 7 properties, and it's called Bundy Museum Complex. And they're just getting the walls up and finished off in there, and that's going to be a new arts literary center. And they have a nationally recognized poet. Matter of fact, he just spoke at a conference in Scotland and all over this country, and he's been published dozens of times, that has rented most of that building. And he's agreed to have a section in there on Rod Serling, since it's a literary center in writing. So there will be Rod Serling photos and memorabilia on some of the walls there. And then we're going to have a gift shop in there that will accommodate all of his people and their art and stuff. So anything we have that's not legitimate. Now, what I mean by that is, like in the gift shop in the theater, when you come in the door, we sell books like Nick's book, Martin Graham's Twilight Zone book, any original books and things like that. But we have over 500 duplicate Twilight Zone comic books. We have several hundred duplicate Twilight Zone magazines. So that type of material, the secondary used market, will be on sale in the visitor center, in the new art literary center. So now when you come to see Rod Serling, you'll want to see all 3 places, the visitor center, in the new literary center, because there will be a little bit of Rod Serling. That's one way we can expand from the limited area we have in the actual exhibit room.
Okay. Sounds good. And what else can people do? An idea of copies of, if they want to watch when you open the museum back up, there's a TV where they can watch some of the episodes.
Yeah, you're referring to our 1952 refurbished television. Of course, we gutted that and put in a digital modernistic, and we have a DVD hooked up to it. So out of the hundreds of DVDs we have of Rod Serling-related material, we have quite a bit of vintage stuff from the 50s and 60s that, although you can see it at the Paley Center and pay to watch a show, and UCLA has some of it, we have a few things that none of the others have. So what I did is I pulled 10 great pieces. Most of them are 30-minute shows, live kinescopes and things. And there's a list there on the wall, and you can ask one of the staffers to just put the DVD in. You can pull up some chairs, up to 10 people in a semicircle I've had there, and watch vintage 50s Rod Serling material on a 50s early television. So that's one part of the aspect of the exhibit. As far as the exhibit itself goes, we have just around 3,000 pieces in there. Now, it sounds like a lot, but you have to consider, like, we've got every Twilight Zone episode. So there's like 152 or 6. And then you've got every Night Gallery episode. So that takes up big chunks. But we have probably 100 newspaper clippings, mostly from Binghamton, that people have never seen, that people have donated. They found in junk shops and in old newspapers and have donated to the museum. And a lot of them are very fun, and some are very educational, very interesting. And then, we have the strips, all 10 of the books by Tony Albareva and Carol Serling on Rod Serling strips. So there's a little bit of everything. We have a lot of documents. Martin Grams had donated several hundred documents that he was using for his book for research. So they're in binders, and people can sit and go through and read strips or read some of the documentations. For example, there's a short letter in there from Burgess Meredith to Rod, thanking Rod for picking him to do Time Enough at Last. That it's his favorite thing he's done at that point. And then a reply from Rod back to him. So there's that type of letters and things that are in there. And they're a lot of fun. Some of them are in Martin's Twilight Zone book, but not all of them. So we try and rotate the exhibit. I was trying to rotate it 2 or 3 times a year, at least 30% of the material. But what we had planned on for April that we had to cancel with the virus was a complete take everything off the walls, move the cabinets, and put everything up new. And, of course, it never happened because we had to close in March like everything else. So I'm hoping by the time that we'd actually get to do another In the Zone program there that everything will be new on the walls. We bought 20 or 30 new original press photos, wire photos, TBS, Twilight Zone, and NBC Night Gallery, and the loaners, and just so much new material that way. Some things that have been donated recently, and hopefully we can get some of the props back out. So, hopefully by the time we open up again officially, there will be quite a bit of new material there.
And, Nick, when you've been working on, or when you were working on your book, were you at the Bundy Museum doing some research, and you were going to other collections of archives across the country as well? You were right. Everywhere finding those details that really put coalesced Rod's life for your book.
Yeah, well, I went everywhere that I needed to go. There are 3 primary archives really for Serling scripts and correspondence and things like that. And the main one is in Wisconsin. It's at the Madison Historical Society in Wisconsin. They have an archive of 81 boxes of material of scripts and letters and contracts and all sorts of things. And so I went there and I went through as much of it as I possibly could. After that, there is an archive at UCLA. When Rod was living in Pacific Palisades, it was not far from UCLA, and he donated a lot of material to that institution, so I went there. Third one is at Ithaca College. When Rod taught at Ithaca College for many years at the end of his life, he ended up donating a lot of material to Ithaca College. So I went to those 3 locations. I went to Ithaca several times, and Wisconsin and UCLA once. And just to get information on every show that Rod Serling wrote that was produced, or really that wasn't produced. I cover a lot of the stuff that wasn't produced in the book as well. So those were the main ones that I went to. And I also went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and went through his college file, his transcripts and things like that. And I got some really great information from there that I had never seen published anywhere. So that was really educational there. So there were basically 4 locations, and then yes, I visited the Bundy Museum several times and talked to Mike, and we shared film, shared videos that he didn't have or I didn't have. So that was helpful because one of the things that I did in writing the book was I watched everything. So I watched every show that Rod Serling wrote that exists. I've seen. essentially. There may be one or two, and that's kind of a long story, but that I haven't seen, but that's a long story. But basically, anything that exists, so it either exists at the Paley Center in New York City, and I went there probably 7, 8, 9 times to watch everything that's there. UCLA, the Film Archive at UCLA. The Library of Congress had a couple of shows that don't exist anywhere else. I went there, watched those. And then all the stuff that people like Mike and I kind of just collect from the under the table market, so to speak, that's just out there amongst film collectors and things. So, so I gathered all of that stuff. So I watched, I did the count at one point, and I forget what it is now, but it was hundreds of shows, because he wrote over 250 scripts that were produced on television or radio or film. So I watched everything that exists. So and that was the fun part of writing the book and researching it, was watching all of this stuff, because one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Mark, that Playhouse 90 and some of the pre-Twilight Zone stuff. Well, that was one of my main motivating factors in writing the book, was that I wanted to expose people to this stuff that Rod Serling wrote outside of the Twilight Zone. We didn't need another Twilight Zone book. There's plenty of them. Mark Zicree's Twilight Zone Companion is still the gold standard, I think, for the Twilight Zone. But then you have Martin Graham's book, which is a doorstopper book, because it has all the information you could possibly want in it, in that book. And then there's so many others. So I had no interest in writing a Twilight Zone book, but of course I cover the Twilight Zone because it is such an important part of Rod Serling's career. But I wanted to expose people to some of the stuff that he wrote before the Twilight Zone, and particularly after the Twilight Zone, because I think that period is even more unheard of than the earlier period. People kind of think that, it's very easy to get an impression of Rod Serling's career if you read some of the other books that, he did the Twilight Zone and then he just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And that's really, really not true. He wrote plenty of really, really good stuff after Twilight Zone, including lots of night galleries. Not my favorite series in the world, but he wrote a lot of great stuff for it. So he wrote plenty of really, really great stuff after the Twilight Zone that doesn't get a fair shake sometimes.
Right, and Shelley wanted me to tell both of you hi.
Hello, Shelley.
Hi, Shelley.
But I had a good idea, cover the Twilight Zone, but there was a lot more to his career than just the one series. And sitting there, reading your book, and you get the short-lived series, The New People. I never heard of that one. Was that something that? He wrote
the pilot episode of that series, and that was it. He wrote the pilot episode, and he also wrote kind of the Bible for the series. So he kind of, if you read a lot of the news clippings from that time, a lot of them refer to it as Rod Serling's The New People, as if he created it, but he really didn't create it. It was Aaron Spelling's show. Aaron Spelling created it, but Rod Serling virtually created it, because he did give the show its Bible in terms of who the characters were and what their motivations were. And he not only did the pilot episode, but he submitted a whole bunch of other ideas for other episodes that could be used. He had that was one of the shows that he had kind of a falling out with. Not with the Peep. What happened was, to give you the short version, is that it was supposed to be an hour-long show. It was generally speaking, TV shows are a half hour or an hour, and this was going to be an hour show, and they filmed it as an hour. Rod Serling's name is on the screen. It's written by Rod Serling. It's an hour long, and I watched that version at the Paley Center. And what happened was, before it aired, the network, which was ABC, had this brilliant idea, and it may not have been a terrible idea, who knows, but they had this idea that they wanted to try this kind of unusual bit of time of scheduling. What they wanted to do is they wanted to take an hour-and-a-half time slot and split it between two shows. And that meant that they both have to be 45 minutes long instead of an hour. So they had to cut about 15 minutes, or maybe 12 minutes or so with commercials or whatever, but out of that script, out of the show. And once they decided to do that, Rod Serling said, "Take my name off of it. I don't want anything to do with it." And it was the only time in his career that he actually took his name off the script in protest. And so if you see the version, there's two versions. The full-length version is not available anywhere. It's at the Paley Center. They do have a copy of it. But the shorter version you can kind of find online, again, through some of those, secondhand sites of film collectors. It says it's written by John Phillips. It was a pseudonym that Rod Serling used for that purpose because he felt that it was butchered. And in fact, one of the fun things when I was researching the book was when you look at the scripts at the Wisconsin Historical Society, they're Rod Serling scripts. They're the ones that he donated. So what he did was he wrote notes to himself or notes to whoever might be reading them in future years. He wrote them generally, on the cover. And on the cover of that script, he wrote, "This brought a lot of money, but ABC cut 15 minutes out of it, and it bled to death." So that's how he felt about it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying I wasn't aware of that, and Nick, just found all this fascinating information that kind of links, what Rod was doing from the end of the Twilight Zone to the Night Gallery. Most people probably don't realize that 7 Days in May and The Loner and Planet of the Apes are in there too.
Yeah, amazing. That's pretty amazing little body of work right there.
Right. Okay, Mike, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Go ahead. On the New People pilot in the mid '80s, I was doing. I did 40 years of film conventions around the country, and I ran into a priest from way up in, I think, Wyoming on the. It's out there, Washington, up near the Canadian border. That had it was a group of boys' home, and he was a film collector. All the old MGM musicals and stuff. They had no television. They had no anything up there then. So he bought all these rare films, and he's the one that actually had the 35 millimeter print, not 16, but the national network print of the New People pilot. So he's the one that sent it to me, and I had it transferred to New York City. And, so Nick mentioned the 45-minute time slot. Well, you got to take it one step further, 45 minutes minus commercials. It runs 38 minutes.
Right.
And so that's the version that all of us have on tape. So I have not even seen the complete version at the Paley Center because I can't get in the city and get pushed around and everything. So, I would love to see it, but that's how, I was the one that got that. We did trades. I did trades when I was with the foundation and myself with the Paley Center way back in the late 80s. 2 or 3 trades from stuff that I had gathered through the foundation, and then one trade of some of my own personal material for some other stuff that was not Serling related. So it's funny how collectors have turned up just like the Rare Loner promo. CBS does not have a copy. That's why it's not on the box set. But a friend of mine does, and we obtained it about 4 years ago now, and have shown it several times at the museum. And it's a very rare piece. Someday it'll probably end up on eBay. I recently gave Nick a copy, but it's a 9-minute little gem because I actually like the footage that's in that better than what aired in the actual episodes because the cast is all different other than Lloyd Bridges. They're all different character actors, and the sets are different. Some scenes that were indoors are now outdoors. The dialogue is different. It just blows me away for that 9 minutes. And then to have Rod come out at the beginning and talk something like "I am not the reject from the Twilight Zone" or something like that. And then actually hearing Rod's voice doing the famous narration of the overlying narration over the theme song is amazing. So, thank God for collectors. A lot of rare materials have come out of there. As a matter of fact, I found in a 50-gallon barrel of films that I bought bulk, you don't know what you're getting, I found the 10 or 12-minute Night Gallery promo that I'd never seen surface anywhere else yet. And I'm the one that found the Sanka Coffee promo where he just appears at the end for Twilight Zone. A friend of mine had it, and he actually struck a negative and charged us lab costs, and we made 2 60-millimeter prints for us, which the foundation has. So a lot of material. And the famous Insight episode, The Hate Syndrome, Powerful Piece, now is surfaced in color, but when I read about that in the Paley Center retrospective they did around 85 or so, I'm not sure of the year, that mentioned that. So I actually called the Catholic organization that had that TV show, Series Insight, and they said, we can strike you a negative. We'll use our negative and strike you a brand new print, but you have to pay the lab costs. So the foundation did do it, and it was $275. And that's how we were the first ones to ever get the actual program of the Insight, which now is surfaced in color, thanks to the UCLA archives out there. And we're thankful that that's up on YouTube now in color. So collectors salvage a lot of not just silent movies that were considered lost, but a lot of vintage television. That's how I found Christmas for Sweeney. A matter of fact, I bought it at a film show, and Carol Serling says, I didn't write that. I said, yes, you did. And I said, it has his name right on it, written by Rod Serling. She says, I don't remember that at all. So I sent her the video of it, and she says, oh, I hate it. She says, it's so schmaltzy. She says, don't you ever show that. And I said, Carol, I'm showing it next month at the film festival. And Helen Foley, the teacher, says, you can't show it. I said, I'm showing it at the film festival. I said, this is early Rod Serling, 1950. The first or second thing he ever wrote. There's some discrepancy of which is which. And I love it. I've probably seen it 50 times. Yes, it's I love anything Christmas, but it is schmaltzy, is my word for it. But I still love it. It's vintage Rod Serling. And, how can you not enjoy it? So, and then she didn't remember Man in the Funny Suit, where Rod played himself. And so she asked me for a copy. So anything, Carol and I had a good working relationship for several years. And I sent her a lot of rare material, and she did me, too. A funny story about rare material I just talked about in my last program a few nights ago on Facebook Live, that there were 2 episodes that were not in the original syndication package, for like 30 years. And one of them was Sounds and Silences, one of Nick's least watchable episodes. And not one of my favorites, but I enjoy it because I knew Penny Singleton, and John MacGyver was one of my favorite character actors. So, yeah, is it good? Not really, but I still enjoy watching it at least once a year just to see. I have tape recordings of Penny Singleton and I, too, that I treasure. So somebody had posted, I think it was Roger Scarlett, because I couldn't remember the other episode that it was not in syndication, and he came back with, I think you're talking about the account, but that's not true.
Mike, I think,
yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think actually, believe it or not, I think there were actually about 6 episodes that were not included in syndication because there were, if you remember, there was the Twilight Zone Silver Anniversary Special in 1984. The big hook in that one was 3 lost Twilight Zone episodes, and so there were 3 in that one, and that was miniature, one of the hour-long ones. That was not included in syndication, so that had not been seen in 50 years. So miniature was one, Sounds and Silences was another, and Short Drink from a Certain Fountain was another one. Right. That's at least 3, and then you had Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge was not actually included in syndication because, as we know the story with that, it was not really a Twilight Zone episode. It was they bought it to use it as a Twilight Zone episode, so they didn't include that one. So that's 4. And then there were a couple of the Parallel, another hour-long one. That one was not included. That's 5, and I believe there was one more. But you bring up this now. We're going to get into real minutia now. But this is something I just came to my attention again recently, so I might as well mention it. But it's funny if you look at news articles from the time of around, say, 1968, 79, 70, when the Twilight Zone was just really hitting its stride in syndication. Almost every article says that there were 139 Twilight Zone episodes. I mean, I find this over and over again, 139 Twilight Zone episodes, and there's actually 156. And I have tried to figure out where in the world would they get this 139 number from. And so I tried to do the math, and I was thinking, well, maybe they didn't include the hour-long episodes because there were 18 of them. But if that was the case, then it would be 138 episodes, not 139. And it would be easier to figure out if there were one too many, because then you could say there was one more that they left out, including plus the hour-long episodes. But it's not. It's one one too few. So every which way I've done it, if you take those 6 episodes that weren't in syndication, right now it's 150, and then the 16-hour-long ones, because we already said 2 of them were in the syndication, so 6. So now the math just doesn't work any which way, but every article says 139 episodes, so they're all wrong. So one day I'm going to figure out where that number came from, but I still haven't quite figured it out.
Yeah, that's funny. I never heard that. Now, what's interesting, I'm glad you stopped me and corrected me there, because what I based mine on, the 2, is, and I corrected Roger when he said the encounter. I have 2 letters from Carol I just read again the other day, and she told in there that when the encounter aired, the networks took the films and put a label over it, said banned from television, could never be shown again. And so Carol had Rod's print. Remember, he donated all the films to Ithaca. So she had the network 16 millimeter with all the commercials. So he transferred that, according to the letter. She had it transferred and sent it to me to show to George Takei at one of the, I think it was at the Syracuse Star Trek convention when I was doing 90-minute programs on Rod Serling for about 6 years. And we'd have 1,000 people at these programs. And she says, you can't tell them where you got this from. CBS doesn't even know we have it. And so I wasn't even able to tell them where it came from. So that was banned. So that's not one that wasn't syndicated. It was just literally banned not to be shown again. Thank God they ended up putting it on the DVD.
Right, but it actually wasn't syndicated for that reason, though. That's why it hadn't been seen in so long.
Right.
Yeah, because they actually pulled it, yeah.
But what I based, the trouble I had coming up with was the short drink. And I said at the end, I think that was what it was. Well, I answered Roger because we have an original press photo from CBS. It had to be early 90s because I was still in Endicott at the time, before 93 when I moved to Johnson City back to the old house. And it shows a split screen with both episodes, photos, sounds and silences, and short drink. And it says that these were never in syndication until now, and Carol Serling sponsored this as a 1-hour TV show special in the early 90s. So that's why I based it on 2. I'm not aware of the earlier special that you're mentioning from the 80s. So that's great to know, because send me a printout, or did you mention that in your book?
I do mention it. Yeah, I do mention it in the book. But it is funny that is a show, actually, the Twilight Zone Silver Anniversary Special that hasn't actually shown up, and I haven't found it. And that's the version where they have the miniature is parts of it are colorized, and not only that, but I believe Earl Serling hosted. No, she hosted the one from the movie when the movie came out. But this was hosted by an actor who was on the Twilight Zone. His name escapes me. But so it had kind of an introduction to it also, and the video of that show has not shown up anywhere as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I didn't know it existed until you just mentioned it, because I said, when you were working on your book, you sent me a lot of it in advance, and it was bigger print, and I could read it. When your book came out, I had both cataracts. Remember, I had zero vision in one eye and 10% in the other. So I could barely skim it. So it's in the Bundy. I donated that on your and my behalf to the museum. So I can't literally sit there and read every page like I'd like to. But so I wasn't aware of that 80s special.
Right.
Yeah. Mike, you mentioned the man in the funny suit. You showed that Thursday night at the our get together last year. I think that's probably about the only Playhouse 90 episode I've ever seen. But I really like that, and Rod is playing himself. Ed Wynn.
Everybody themselves in it. It wasn't Playhouse. It was the Westinghouse Digital Playhouse. And
okay.
Interesting about that. Like I said, I found that in the late 70s on 16 millimeter, a collector in California, and I had to pay him $50 to transfer it for me. So that's how we got a hold of that before anybody ever had that film. And so I sent that to Carol. And to me, I've watched it at least 50 times. I watch it at least once or twice a year. And, I cry every time. I laugh every time. It's just a powerful piece. And Nick had just mentioned how he used the other name, taking it off of the screen. He threatened to have his name pulled from, Requiem for a Heavyweight, his second Emmy, because of Ed Wynn and the goofing up of the lines and going into funny jokes and characters and funny hats. And he gives a famous little speech for about a minute and a half in there about, you don't know what it takes to write a requiem, and the blood and the sweat and the tears and all of this, and it's just so powerful. And yet, because of the situation, the only time in history that I know of where they hired an understudy for a lead character to go in on a minute's notice and stuff, that's the only way Rod agreed to stay on. So I love it because, he plays himself, and so many others are in it, to play themselves. Red Skelton's in it and had a very critical part in Requiem coming off, because when Edwin comes in drunk the day to do the show, he had never drank in his life, never been drunk, and they were going up the steps to fire him, and he stops him, and he says, you can't fire this man. He's been in showbiz 50, 60 years. You have to, respect this and honor it, and we'll sober him up, and he'll do fine. And so they talked him out of firing him, and look at the critical acclaim he received for his performance. It was just brilliant. But Rod literally threatened to take his name off, in his own words, playing himself.
And Ed would go on to be in Pitch for the Angels, the Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, one for the Angels, right?
Yeah, okay, but and then in that mid-60s time frame, Keenan would be in Dr. Strangelove, saying you're going to have to answer the Coca-Cola Company. Was that his line?
I wouldn't know.
Okay. Yeah, it's just it's really I find it amazing that after talking with you two over the years, you just see this real renaissance of American concept, really developing into having people getting their starts on some of the Twilight Zone episodes. All these just connections that went on over the years. Like Keenan being in Dr. Strangelove. Just moving on to different projects. But there's all these people really got their starts at the same place, just few places around the same time. It's really fascinating to process what was going on in that, the second half of the 1950s time period. And Nick, you cover that really well, and you're getting. It has all the documentation and sample videos there. It's really been a learning experience for me.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to hear that. It's they called it the golden age of television for a reason. It was an exciting time for television. And as Rod Serling will be the first to tell you that sometimes it could be it could be overrated. You get the idea that everything was great back then, and there was a lot of bad stuff as well. But there was an excitement in the live television atmosphere that you just can't get in film when you're rehearsing, and you don't have that pressure of having to get it right immediately. And that piece that Mike's talking about, the man in the funny suit. that was one of the things that they were dealing with, is that, this was Requiem for Heavyweight was going to be a live presentation on Playhouse 90, and you had an actor, Ed Wynn, who was known as a comedian. He was a comedian his whole life, and in the rehearsals he was terrible. He was continuously lapsing into shtick. He was doing it when he could remember his lines, and half the time he couldn't remember his lines, but when he could remember them, he was delivering them as if he was a comedian. And Rod did say, if this goes on, if we're going to use this guy, I'm taking my name off of this. And because it was the pressure was, it's going to be live. We have one chance to get this right. And the guy who was the champion for Edwin, really, besides Red Skelton, was Martin Manulis, the producer of Playhouse 90. He stood behind Ed Wynn, and he said, "Listen, this guy's a professional. He's been in this business for 50 years. I'm not going to give up on him. He'll get his act together. He'll get it right." But he did concede that, let's get an understudy in. Let's get somebody who knows the part, so in case anything terrible happens on live TV, we can pull him out and throw another actor in there. And Mike's right. I think they said it was the only time ever that they hired an understudy for certainly for that series. And so the Man in the Funny Suit is about that story, about how hard it was for Ed Wynn to get ready to play that part, and he came through brilliantly. He gives this heart-wrenching, brilliant performance, and he got tremendous critical acclaim, and he's better than his son Keenan Wynn in it. Keenan Wynn was in a lot of different Serling things. He was in a Twilight Zone episode called World of His Own, which was actually written by Richard Matheson. He was also in a great Serling piece called The Rack for U.S. Steel Hour. So he was in a lot of things. Keenan Wynn is not one of my favorite actors, but he was in a lot of different Serling things, and Ed Wynn went on from Playhouse 90 to do, as you said, one for the Angels, Twilight Zone episode. Then he did a 5th season Twilight Zone episode called 99 Years Without Slumbering, which was not a Serling episode. That was a George Clayton Johnson episode. And when Edwin died, his one of his eulogies was delivered by Jack Palance, who was his co-star in Requiem for Heavyweight, and it was written by Rod Serling. I mean, so Rod Serling, after Requiem, when he saw how brilliant Edwin was, Rod Serling was effusive with his apology to Edwin that I should never have doubted you. You were brilliant. I'm eating I'm eating crow right now. You were terrific, and I'm in your debt. I'm forever in your debt. And so Edwin starred in, really, in some ways, the first Twilight Zone episode, because there was the pilot, which is Where's Everybody, but then the first episode after that was One for the Angels, with Ed Wynn. So he wanted to repay Ed Wynn for that, for how he felt that he treated them. I'm sure Rod Serling didn't treat him badly, but because he just didn't believe in him at that point. But he learned his lesson, I guess.
Yeah, I'm so glad it worked out. For those that don't know who the understudy was, it was Ned Glass, and for those that are into the old musicals, West Side Story, he was the shopkeeper that was close friends with the two characters. But he had a great career himself, and he was a short, thin gentleman, delivered the lines well in rehearsals. But it would not have been the same. I mean, you just sit there and watch this, and I'm blown away every time I watch it with Edwin's performance, and I agree with Nick. I don't care for Keenan Wynn either. I'm sure he was a nice guy, but I find him stiff and not that good of an actor, not that fun to watch. But it was the first time the father-son. That was the whole premise of it's just an afterthought when they were trying to reach Keenan Wynn. That Edwin answered the phone because Keenan was out of the country, and that's when they hit him with the idea. Hey, this would be great to have. Your first appearance on with your father, with your son, and your first dramatic role on television. So it was a brilliant idea that just hit them, and they went with it, and it couldn't be more powerful. And I'm so glad you mentioned Jack Palance, because he was a friend of Mike Kenny's father, and he lived not far from Kenny's house in Scranton, and he would come over the house quite often and buy films for his collection, and he always corrected everybody. It was Palance is what he would say.
Oh, really?
His name,
okay.
It was mispronounced. But, you get a glimpse of him, and you read about Jack rehearsing after hours with Ed Wynn because he believed in him, too, not just Manlius and Red Skelton. Yeah. He really believed in Ed and busted his chops to do it. And then, ironically, Jack isn't even in the episode Man in the Funny Suit. Every other character is. Not that he was needed in it to tell the story, but it would have been nice if he had a small part in it for saving, helping to save the film.
Okay. Hey, Mike and Nick, we have 4 minutes left, and I want to give both of you plenty of time to plug where to get Rod Serling, his life, work, and imagination. Mike, your Facebook live streams, anything else you want to discuss in the last 4 minutes. Nick, you want to go first?
Sure. Oh, thanks. Okay, yeah. The book is called Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination. It's available everywhere. You can get it on Amazon.com. If you happen to be going out these days, you can certainly go out to Barnes & Noble or probably any other bookstore and pick it up. It's been out for over a year now, and it's still doing great. And so that's available. And if you are interested in supporting the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, just go to rodserling.com. And listen, send us $5, $10, whatever it may be. It will help us to do some of the things that we're trying to do to help preserve Rod Serling's legacy, particularly in the Binghamton area, but really everywhere. And if you have a chance, go on to that ipetitions.com site. That's where you'll find the Rod Serling Recreation Park petition. Again, it's ipetitions.com, and then just search Rod Serling, and I'm sure it will come up. Or you can find it in a million places on Facebook, on the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation page on Facebook. And my page on Facebook, I have a page that's solely for the book. So it's for the book and to promote Rod Serling, and that's called Dimensions of Imagination. So if you go on Facebook and search Dimensions of Imagination, I'm sure you'll find me. And I'll be doing a short presentation at 10 a.m. on Sunday from the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation Facebook page. I'm going to go live and just say a few words and give a little bit of a tribute to Rod Serling on just to commemorate the anniversary on June 28th.
Okay.
And the same basically goes for the Rod Serling Archive at the Bundy Museum. You can go to the Bundy Museum website, bundymuseum.org, or Rod Serling Archive. We have a Facebook page, and we too have a link for PayPal. And what we do is a little bit different because we have the exhibit. So any money that's donated to us goes to the Rod Serling Archive, where I have the pleasure of spending that money to buy new material for the exhibit. So it's your exhibit. It's not mine. It's for you, the public. It's free. And so that's how we utilize the funds. And the same as Nick and the foundation. It's all good. It's all for the preservation of Rod Serling's legacy. And let's get this job done on the Recreation Park. I thank you, Barbara and Nick, for having us both on. When you first called me about it, I says, if Nick's going to do it, I'm in. If he's not, I'm not. I wasn't in the mood. And so I'm so glad. Because you can see we have a good relationship back and forth. And that we enjoy working off of each other. And we did a lot of trading to the mutual benefit of both organizations of material. So thank you very much for having us. I've enjoyed it. The fastest 2 hours I've ever done on one of these.
Always great to talk with you, Mike. It was fun.
Yeah, and it's just quality people. What you two do enriches the world, by promoting Rod's legacy. It's like that's what I've gotten from.
Yeah, that's a great compliment. I know